Battle of Stalingrad, July 17, 1942 to February 2, 1943. Successful Soviet defense of the city of Stalingrad, now Volgograd, Russia, USSR, during World War II. Russians consider it to be one of the greatest battles of their Great Patriotic War. It stopped the German advance into the Soviet Union and marked the turning of the tide of war in favor of the Allies. Stalingrad was a large industrial city producing armaments and tractors and was an important prize in itself for the invading German army. Capturing the city would cut Soviet transport links with southern Russia, and Stalingrad would then serve to anchor the northern flank of the larger German drive into the oil fields of the Caucasus. In addition, seizing the city that bore the name of Soviet leader Joseph Stalin would serve as a great personal and propaganda victory for Adolf Hitler. German war planners hoped to achieve that end with Fall Blau, Operation Blue, a proposal that Hitler assessed and summarized in Führer Directive No. 41 on April 5, 1942. Hitler's goal was to eliminate Soviet forces in the south, secure the region's economic resources, and then wheel his armies either north to Moscow or south to conquer the remainder of the Caucasus. The offensive would be undertaken by Army Group South under Field Marshal Fedor von Bock. On June 28, 1942, operations began with significant German victories. On July 9th, Hitler altered his original plan, and Army Group South was split into Army Group A under Field Marshal Wilhelm List and Army Group B under Bock. Within days, Bock was replaced at the head of Army Group B by Field Marshal Maximilian von Weichs. The division of forces placed tremendous pressure on an already strained logistical support system. It also caused a gap between the two forces, allowing Soviet forces to escape encirclement and retreat to the east. As Army Group A captured Rostov-na-Donu, it penetrated deeply into the Caucasus. Army Group B made slow progress towards Stalingrad, Operation Fishrier. Stalin and the Soviet High Command responded to the summer offensive by forming the Stalingrad Front with the 62nd, 63rd, and 64th Armies under Marshal Semyon Timoshenko. The 8th Air Army and 21st Army were also placed under his command, while the initial Soviet response to Fall Blau was to maintain an orderly withdrawal and thus avoid the massive encirclements and troop losses that had characterized the early months of Operation Barbarossa. On July 28th, Stalin issued Order No. 227, decreeing that the defenders at Stalingrad would take not one step back. He also refused the evacuation of any civilians, stating that the army would fight harder, knowing that they were defending residents of the city. For his part, Hitler continued to directly intervene at the operational level, and in August he ordered Hoth to turn around and head towards Stalingrad from the south. The Red Army, however, put up a determined resistance, yielding ground only very slowly and at a high cost to the 6th Army as it approached Stalingrad. On August 23rd, a German spearhead penetrated the city's northern suburbs, and the Luftwaffe rained incendiary bombs that destroyed most of the city's wooden housing. By mid-September, the Germans had pushed the Soviet forces in Stalingrad back until the latter occupied only a 9-mile, 15-kilometer, long strip of the city along the Volga, and that strip was only 2 or 3 miles, 3 to 5 kilometers wide. The Soviets had to supply their troops by barge and boat across the Volga from the other bank. At that point, Stalingrad became the scene of some of the fiercest and most concentrated fighting of the war. The most critical moment came when on October 14th, the Soviet defenders had their backs so close to the Volga that the few remaining supply crossings of the river came under German machine gun fire. The Germans, however, were growing dispirited by heavy losses, fatigue, and the approach of winter. The turning point of the battle came with a huge Soviet counteroffensive, codenamed Operation Uranus, November 19th to 23rd. It was launched in 2 spearheads, some 50 miles, 80 kilometers, north and south of the German salient, whose tip was at Stalingrad. The counteroffensive utterly surprised the Germans, who thought the Soviets incapable of mounting such an attack. The attacks quickly penetrated deep into the flanks, and by November 23rd, the 2 prongs of the attack had linked up at Kalak, about 60 miles, 100 kilometers, west of Stalingrad. With winter setting in and food and medical supplies dwindling, Paulus's forces grew weaker. Hitler declared that the Sixth Army would be supplied by the Luftwaffe, but the air convoys could deliver only a fraction of the necessary supplies. In mid-December, Hitler ordered one of the most talented German commanders, Field Marshal Erich von Manstein, to form a special army corps to rescue Paulus's forces by fighting its way eastward, Operation Winter Tempest. But Hitler refused to let Paulus fight his way westward at the same time in order to link up with Manstein. That fatal decision doomed Paulus's forces, since Manstein's forces then simply lacked the reserves needed to break through the Soviet encirclement single-handedly. With Soviet armies closing in as part of Operation Ring, begun January 10, 1943, the situation was hopeless. The Sixth Army was surrounded by 7 Soviet armies. On January 31st, Paulus disobeyed Hitler and agreed to give himself up. 22 generals surrendered with him, and on February 2nd, the last of 91,000 frozen, starving men, all that was left of the 6th and 4th armies, surrendered to the Soviets. The Soviets recovered 250,000 German and Romanian corpses in and around Stalingrad, and total Axis casualties, Germans, Romanians, Italians, and Hungarians, are believed to have been more than 800,000 dead, wounded, missing, or captured. Of the 91,000 men who surrendered, only some 5,000 to 6,000 ever returned to their homelands, the last of them a full decade after the end of the war in 1945. The rest died in Soviet prison and labor camps. On the Soviet side, official Russian military historians estimate that there were 1,100,000 Red Army dead, wounded, missing, or captured in the campaign to defend the city. An estimated 40,000 civilians died as well. In 1945, Stalingrad was officially proclaimed a hero city of the Soviet Union for its defense of the motherland. In 1959, construction began of an enormous memorial complex dedicated to the heroes of the Stalingrad battle,